the ground, where the Russian Defense Ministry has said that its forces have carried out a massive strike on Ukraine's military-industrial complex, energy facilities and port infrastructure in Kremenchuk. The ministry has added that the strike was in response to Ukraine's overnight attacks on Russia's civilian objects, adding that the strike involved long-range, high-precision air and ground-based weapons, including Kinzhal hypersonic missiles and long-range unmanned aerial vehicles. Meanwhile, the governor of the Rostov region in Russia has said that Russian air defense units thwarted a drone attack in the region. Earlier, the Russian Defense Ministry had stated that its forces had shot down 77 Ukrainian drones in several locations overnight. Gilbert, of course, as diplomacy is at the forefront of this, aerial strikes continue to fly over borders on the ground. What more can you tell us about the situation, the territorial gains that Russia is making, and of course the damage that both sides are conceding during and approaching these winter months?
Well, I agree with your assessment that both sides are suffering damage caused by the other side. It's not completely lopsided. However, and I understand the Russian military would celebrate its successful attack on Kremenchuk. Nonetheless, the idea that the war will be ended one day sooner by destroying one or another city in Ukraine is nonsense. This is whack-a-mole, as we call it in colloquial English. You hit a mole next to one molehill, and he goes underground and builds and comes out at another molehill. You cannot end the war by these airstrikes. Everybody knows that wars are ended by troops on the ground, not by airstrikes. So the Russian military can celebrate this successful strike with Kinzhal rockets. It's very good target practice for demonstrating the effectiveness of these new generation Russian missiles and drones. But that is not decisive in ending the war. The war will end most likely by the political collapse of Ukraine.
And Gilbert, of course, how, given the broad scope of this and some of those comments there from the US envoy to Ukraine, if this war truly is 10 meters from its end, whether it does reach a diplomatic end or not, do you think Moscow's campaign can look back in prowess?
Well, Moscow's campaign has taken much too long. We're approaching year 4. If other methods had been used rather than this war of attrition, it could have been ended in a matter of weeks, a few months, going back to 2022, even with the interference, the malignant interference of the British and other Westerners who persuaded Mr. Zelensky that they would provide all necessary assistance and he could push back the Russians. Notwithstanding that, if the Russians had used not one-to-one force ratio when they staged their invasion, but the normal military configuration of 3-to-1 advantage over the defending side, then the war would not be going into year 4. So the Russians have a lot of things to be happy about. After all, they are winning, and after all, Ukraine is losing. But this has taken much too long. Many more soldiers and others have died in a war that could have ended much sooner.
And what about the long-term repercussions of it? We've just heard Keith Kellogg say 2 million fatalities on both sides. We don't know the exact number of that, of course. I'm sure we won't for a very long time. We do, however, know infrastructure damaged severely on both sides, along with civilian infrastructure, as you've mentioned. The long term of this conflict, what are your thoughts?
Well, of course, the ratio of how many of those 2 million, he's probably right about 2 million, but he's letting the audience assume that it's 1-to-1, the 1 million Russians, not this nonsense. It's probably more like 1,000,005, 1,000,007 Ukrainians have died or have been maimed for life, and say 300,000 or 400,000 Russians have died or been maimed for life. These are terrible numbers. At the same time, I point out that it's not as though it's one generation is being wiped from the face of Ukraine. People speak blithely as if, this is a war that's being fought by the young. Well, they just don't watch television. They don't see who's doing the fighting. On the Ukrainian side, most of the POWs that are interviewed by Russian television look like they're in their late 50s or 60s. They are not the fresh youth of Ukraine. The fresh youth of Ukraine is here drinking in bars in Brussels, not fighting the war in the trenches. So for Ukraine, this is a devastating loss of males across all age groups, which it will take them a long time to recover from.
Gilbert Doctorow, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's always a pleasure to talk to you here on the programme. We now move on to our next story, and former US